hi so that I know that you're here. Today, we're going to be talking about how to stop scrambling for taxes once and for all. If you found that this year in kind of your tax time, right, you were scrambling to get your expenses together or just scrambling to get your P&L together, all your things over to your tax accountant, or maybe you do your taxes yourself. If you are in that place where you're like, next year will be different, or maybe you haven't even finished taxes, y'all, it is T-9 days. All right. I hate to tell you that. Actually, it's a little bit more, sorry to say, I misspoke because we do have a couple of extra days, but I don't even want to tell you guys we have a couple extra days because you don't want to use them. Still, I always, even though we're extended because of Good Friday, it goes through April 18th is the tax deadline this year. I still always think of it. I try to always get it in by the 15th, no matter what. That is just in my head. So I recommend that you guys do the same. Good morning. Good morning. I see my team member, my community manager, the amazing Crystal. Hi, everybody. Yes. Okay. And for those of you who are like, oh, shoot, I'm still not done. I want to take some stigma out of this right here. All right, there is for whatever reason a stigma around filing an extension for your taxes. It's totally fine. It is not an audit trigger. It's not going to be a red flag at all. And it's going to give you a heck of a lot more time to get things together. Now, when you extend, just FYI, when you do a tax extension for your personal tax return, you have until now October 15th. Don't wait until that 15th. But the extension is to file and not to pay. So I do recommend, especially if you think you're going to owe taxes, if you think you maybe underpaid last year, right? And you think you're going to owe, you probably want to make a tax payment so that you're not going to get yourself into a situation where you have penalties and fees and interest and things like that. So it is an extension to file, but not to pay. And a lot of people are like, well, how do I know what I'm supposed to pay if I haven't filed yet, if I haven't done my taxes? So that's where it can be helpful to work with an accountant or, come up with an estimate based on last year. As long as you make sure that you're paying in the same amount of tax that you paid in last year, then you shouldn't have interest and penalties. So that's kind of the workaround for that. But definitely think about if you're sitting here and you're trying to find an accountant right now in the next 9 days, it's going to be impossible. I will tell you that. Even my preferred vendors are going to be very difficult to get a hold of now because they are working a million hours a week to get through for their current clients. So it's going to be hard to find a new accountant. I usually recommend starting to do that in January or at least February to know who's going to be doing your taxes each and every year, because that just will give them more time, give you more time, and keep you from stressing. Okay, so let's talk about it. How do we make this better? If you're in a place, and tell me how your tax experience, I want to hear from you. Tell me about how taxes have been this year. Have they been better or worse than previous years? About the same? How are you feeling about them? But I'm going to go through kind of 5 things that after you figure out like what your biggest problem is, the first thing we need to do is figure out what went wrong, if anything did, or maybe not even what went wrong, but what could be better. What could be better? And I think now is the best time to do that. Why? Because it's fresh in our minds, right? So I think it's really important while we're in this place to sit down and actually write it out, because you're going to forget, right? You're going to forget. We do this, we think we'll remember, and then we forget. So I want you to think about right now, writing down somewhere, right? What was a pain point? What was the biggest pain point for you this tax season? What would you love to be better next year, right? So if you were kind of, scrambling to categorize the last 6 months of expenses in your QuickBooks file, right? In March, that's probably one of those big pain points. Or maybe you were scrambling to go look for receipts that you needed, right? Maybe you were doing your account reconciliations. Maybe you didn't engage with a tax preparer earlier enough, and so you end up having to do them yourselves or go find, a cheaper alternative to do them. Whatever it is, I want you to think about what would you like to be better? What was that pain point, and what could be better for you? And think about it now, because like I said, 3 months from now, you're going to forget. And we always have the best intentions. I always think this is a good time to talk about setting up new systems because we're receptive to it, right? We're receptive to, okay, I know that something's got to change. I know I've got to do something different because the pain point is still fresh. But as it gets farther and things get in the way, right, we stop thinking about it. So first step is to do that. And then I'm going to talk about coming out of determining, depending on what your pain point is, here are kind of 5 action steps for you to take to make next year better. Okay. So if your problem was you had no system, right? I think that's very common early on in business, where you might just say, I had no system for keeping track of this stuff. It was all kind of everywhere. Maybe it's commingled with personal, or maybe not. Maybe you've kept it separate, but it just feels like you have no system for gathering this information. Then that's the first place to start, of course, right? It's time to institute a system, and it doesn't have to be a complicated system, especially for the early stages of business. You don't need a complicated software typically in the beginning, right? You just need a system for logging your revenue that comes in and your expenses. Okay, so that's kind of the first place. And you want it to be a true P&L. I do recommend that even in early stages of business, you are creating a profit and loss. I just think it starts to train your brain to think like a business owner versus just having a laundry list of expenses somewhere, right? So you really do want to create a profit and loss, but it can be something that maybe is in a spreadsheet, right? And if you're looking for one, I have one in my Financial Fitness Basics course. A lot of you already own my Financial Fitness Basics course, and there is a perfectly great spreadsheet in there that you can enter in. You can actually take downloads from your bank account, and it can help you create a profit and loss. So the first thing is just to figure out a system. Maybe it is time for you to put a software in place, or maybe you need to switch softwares, right? Maybe the one you have isn't working for you. But let me caution you before you go switching softwares thinking something else will be better, because that may not be your problem. But first things first is, what's your system going to be, right? What's your system going to be? Is there a problem with the system that you need to fix? The second thing is, and before you go switching systems, because I think a lot of times people, maybe they get into QuickBooks because that's what everybody's using, and then they don't really know how to use it, right? You don't have any real education in it. You just think, oh, I'll figure it out because I'm a smart person and I can figure things out. But you're not an accountant, right? And this is something you haven't done before. And honestly, there's a lot of things that you can screw up in pretty much any accounting software, but definitely in QuickBooks. There's a lot of things you can screw up if you don't know what you're doing. And so we think the problem is the software. We're like, oh, it's so difficult. The software is so difficult, when we've done no formal education at all. Maybe a YouTube video here or there, but maybe not even that, right? So we think that it should be easy to figure out, but it's complicated to create financial statements that are, correct and right for reporting purposes, and also for our own, internal use purposes. It can be complicated. So let's remember that we might need a little bit of education if you're planning to do it yourself, right? If you are in that place where you want to do it yourself, then you want to be able to invest in some education. And you can start with some YouTube videos. There are some great ones out there, right, that can help you through very specific things you're trying to do. But sometimes it can also be helpful to just have an overall education. QuickBooks even has some that you can do on their website, or there are some amazing people out there that have courses in it. So I feel really strongly in, instead of just switching, to another accounting software, which you're probably going to have a lot of the same issues with, honestly, is figuring out, is it time to invest in education, okay, for yourself so that you can do it better. Now, here's my third thing though, okay, because some of you, right, instead of expending all that time in education, maybe that's not the best use of your time. And that's for you to know. Again, in the beginning of your business, oftentimes we are the one-stop shop. Maybe our bookkeeping isn't super complicated. We just need to learn a few things about it so that we can do it well, right? But as our business grows, and most people wait too long to do this, I promise you this, maybe it's time to think about outsourcing, okay? Maybe it's time to say, all right, this year, I'm not doing this anymore. This is gonna be someone else who knows how to do this already, who can help make sure that we stay on target and can help make sure that we aren't scrambling at the last minute, right? So maybe it's time to consider outsourcing, okay? And I know that a lot of people, we look at, I want to challenge an assumption real quick with you, because I think we look at outsourcing our bookkeeping and we say, I can't afford it. And maybe that's true, but remember, what time is that freeing up for you? And not only that, now you're going to have more available data. Maybe it's not freeing up much time for you because you're not doing it anyway, right? You're not keeping up with it anyway. So it's not really going to save you time. but you will have now access to real-time data you can use in your business, which we're going to get into here in a minute. But I want you to really think about, does it make sense to outsource this? And if the answer is no, not right now, which it may be, right? It may not be something that's feasible right now. I want you to make a goal for when you want to do that, right? When can you outsource this? What is your monetary goal? Where do you want to get to? Maybe it's a revenue level, right, that you want to get to, and then therefore can outsource it. Whatever that looks like. Maybe it's a time frame. Maybe you say in 6 months or next year, for the year 2023, I will outsource it, right? But I want you to make that a goal, because if we don't, we're just going to keep holding on to it. And that's a very scarcity thing. When we're holding on to all these tasks that somebody else could do better than us, probably, and would enjoy a lot more than we do, right? That's a scarcity thing, when we just hang on to them just because we're afraid of the cost of outsourcing them. It's an investment in your business to have somebody doing that work for you that is not you, okay? And I understand, again, budgeting, it gets difficult. And until a certain point, it may not make sense. I'll give you, I like to actually give some specifics, because this is what people ask, like, how much should you spend? I know some people, like, if you're not making a ton yet, maybe you're making $20,000, $25,000 in revenue, it may be hard to afford a bookkeeper, right? Because you're going to have trouble paying less than probably a couple $100s a month for a bookkeeper. And I would say that you probably don't, for bookkeeping specifically, I'm not talking about advisory work, but for bookkeeping and really taxes kind of lumped in there too, I tend to use the rule of thumb of 3% of revenues, right? 3% of revenues. If it's a lot more than that, that may be time to wait and figure out, how can I increase my revenues such that I can get to that place sooner where I can afford someone, right? So I would use that kind of as a rule of thumb. If you go get quotes from different bookkeepers and they are quoting you at, what 10% of your revenue is, then it may be time to figure out, okay, I can put a system in place myself. I can do this myself for a period of time, and then I can outsource it when I can afford it. But typically that 3% of revenues is a good, kind of line in the sand, where if you're under 3% of revenues that you're paying for bookkeeping, it's probably well worth your time, right? And well worth your money. So that's what I would say about that. So think about, is it time to outsource? Do you need to outsource? I think a lot of you are worried about it. Let's elephant in the room that. I think one of the things that we always worry about with outsourcing, and my friends who are bookkeepers can probably validate the fact that they get a lot of people who the first conversation that they have is they're embarrassed, right? They're like, oh, you don't even want to see like what this looks like, right? They're embarrassed about somebody else like seeing what they consider their mess to be in their bookkeeping. And so they hold off from getting someone to fix it because they're worried about feeling judged by a bookkeeper who, let me tell you, has seen worse. I promise you, my bookkeepers, I guarantee you, they have seen worse than what you've got going on. And much better to get that fixed now than to make it even worse over a time period, right? So definitely, and make sure that you're not worried about that. And I think sometimes too, we're worried about, and I know this was always a hang up for me, somebody else seeing our financials and the information in our financials, right? Like somebody else, it's probably a very similar sensation to like being naked in front of people, right? Like you feel like that your finances are one of those things that feel very intimate to you. And so opening that up to somebody else to see what's going on is also something that feels like a little scary and a little worrisome. But I'm going to tell you, that's what they're there for. These people, they're professionals. It's kind of like going to the doctor, right? You're not like, oh no, don't look at me, doctor. Like that's part of it. That's they're professionals. That's what they do. They're not judging you, right? That's not the point. Yeah, April's one of my preferred vendors, and she is a bookkeeper. And yeah, I'm sure she's seen some things, right? like we've all kinds of things. So don't worry about, judgment or what, yeah. Oh, I like this too. April says that I compare it to having someone come clean your house. Oh yes, but that's what they do. Oh, I feel this. I've had this, like for sure. Now, here's what I'm going to tell you, using this as a metaphor, right? Many of us, if you've ever had anyone come clean your house, You probably have done the thing where you like pre-clean. My kids are like, why are we cleaning? Aren't we paying her to clean? I'm like, yes, I know, but like, I need you to clean up first. But I'm going to tell you, for those of you who are going in, and I'm sure April can attest to this, don't pre-clean your bookkeeping for a bookkeeper. Don't do it. Just give it to them as it is. Don't try to get in there and pre-clean for a bookkeeper because you're making it worse. I promise, you're making it harder for them. So just hand it on over when you do that trade-off and allow it to be what it is, right? Allow it to be what it is. Yeah, the pre-clean is a thing. The pre-clean is a thing. I don't know what that is. My girl is coming today and I'm like running around the house doing all the things, but I like it because it actually forces me to like, at least get things picked up and in good order. But yes, I don't pre-clean your books. Okay, so let's see. So I said, here are kind of the things after you've said, what are the pain points? What are the things that were hard? What do I want to change, right? Is it a better system that you need, right? A better system, whether that's a software system or something more manual. Is it education that you need on how to keep your books, right? And are you going to keep up with it if you get that education? Is it time to outsource, right? Or at least time to make a plan for when you're going to outsource. I'm a really big fan of outsourcing, this kind of thing. Most business owners, this is not in their sweet spot of what they're good at or what they like to do. So why are you doing it? There are other things in your business that are better worth your time. The next thing, maybe it's you need to create better habits, right? We need to foster better habits in our business. So what I mean by that is, what are your financial habits? Do you have things that you're doing weekly, monthly, quarterly, right? Do you have those habits kind of honed in that even when there's a 5-alarm fire somewhere in your business, you still make time to do those things? That's why habits are so important. Habits are things that, even if stuff gets in the way, you're always going to do it rather than perpetually put it off. And I think that that's what we do with finances because we think, and this comes into my number 5, but we think like, oh, it's not going to matter until the end of the year. And so it always goes down the list of what's important, but that it should be top of the list all the time. But everything else ends up, superseding it, partially because we don't like to focus on it, but also partially because other things feel more urgent, right? We put the urgent in front of the important. I've talked about this a lot before. Don't consistently put the urgent in front of the important. If you do that, you're never going to get to the important. Right? And then you're going to keep having more urgent things. Urgent things come up because we haven't put the important in front of the urgent sometimes, right? We haven't put those fail safes in place so that less urgent things are going to come at the end of the day. Okay, so that was 4, was habits. Do we need to create better habits around your finances? And number 5, and this one's kind of the linchpin on all of them, is it mindset? Do we need to work on our mindset a little bit? Right? Do we need to really delve into why are we putting this off to begin with? Why aren't we keeping up with this regularly? What is it that is causing that to be a perpetual issue, even though we said last tax season it was going to be better this year? And then the same thing kind of happened, right? So is it that? Is it the fact that we really need to work on where that's coming from in our mindset? And maybe our mindset is thinking about taxes and bookkeeping as something we have to do. And for those of you who are on my masterclass, I did a couple of masterclasses last week, we talked about this, where if you're thinking about bookkeeping and keeping up with your finances as something you only need to do for taxes, i.e. a compliance exercise, i.e. I need to do this so that I don't go to jail, so that I don't get, taxes, extra taxes and fees or get audited or all of that. If that's how you're thinking about your finances, well, then of course you're going to wait and put everything else in front of it, because then your finances only matter in April every year, or maybe March, depending on what type of company you are, right? So of course you're going to put everything else in front of it. It's kind of like when you have a deadline, right? And you have other things, even though, it's best to kind of keep up with things long before the deadline. If that deadline is so far in the future, are you going to be focusing on that today? If you have a deadline for something for next February, what are you working on today? Probably the things that have deadlines this week or next week. So maybe it's time to create those deadlines for yourself, right? And we can do that by switching our mindset around our finances and understanding the fact that our finances are really about having access to that data in real time, right? Knowing how we're doing in our business, being able to look at our P&L and understand what it's telling us about our business, and then being able to make changes to be able to, do better in the future, right? So when we look at our finances, when I look on a quarterly basis, typically, I'm delving into things like profit margins, right? I'm delving into a whole bunch of different numbers, some of my key metrics that we track in our business. I'm really delving into those because those key metrics, those numbers tell me the trajectory of my business. And if I don't like what I see, or I think it can get better, if I'm looking at that in real time, I can say, okay, well, I know what changes. Let's try to make these various different changes. So for example, those of you who are on my email list, here's an example. It's not always like P&L numbers, right? We're talking about bookkeeping and P&L numbers, but there may be other metrics that it's important to keep up with as well, right? So for example, on my email list, we look at email list open rates and click rates, right? And we can see how many people are opening our emails, how many people are clicking on our emails, which is even more important, kind of that email engagement rate. And if we start seeing a dip in that, if we're paying attention to it, right? If we start seeing a dip in that, we know, okay, something's not working. And now let's brainstorm to try to fix that, to try to get our open rates up. If we're not paying attention to it, it's not going to improve. Same thing with your profit. If you're not paying attention to it, it's not going to improve. If you're not looking at it and thinking, okay, how can I make this better? What things can I do to improve this situation, right? Maybe I need to look at ways to increase my revenue. Maybe I need to look at ways to reduce my costs. But if you're not paying attention to it, it's not going to get any better, right? So that is why it's so important to really have that mindset that your data in your business, if you're looking at it regularly, is going to get you to your goals faster, right? Even if you don't know what you're looking for. And I think that's the other thing that people say, I don't even know what to look at though. Like, what am I even supposed to look at in my P&L? Well, there's a lot of different things. It depends on your business, right? But if your P&L is set up in a way that makes sense for your type of business, you're going to be able to garner a lot of information from that just by looking at it, right? Just by looking at it, maybe comparing it to the last month, comparing it to the same month of last year. I love looking at comparative P&Ls because I think you can tell so much. And then maybe you see an increase, maybe there's a spike in your costs and you don't remember what that is. So you need to go delve in and figure out what that is. Or maybe your revenue fell in the same month compared to last month. And then it's time to go look and figure out why, what happened. And is there something you can do, right, to fix that? But it's so important to be setting aside that time to look at your finances at least every single month, and having your bookkeeping in order, right? Like, so I came from a big company, worked for Coca-Cola bottling company. And of course, right, we only file our taxes really like once a year, just like everybody else. But you best believe we had quite the system for closing the books, right? And that's something that a lot of business owners don't have, but a bookkeeper can help you do that, can help you close the books. And what that means is you're looking at, usually it's monthly, you're going to close your books, sometimes more frequently, but typically it's monthly. So for the month of March, what would be happening right now is, okay, all the transactions are in for March. Now we're reconciling to the bank account, making sure everything looks good. It matches up. We're not missing any transactions. We don't have transactions duplicated. Yay. Okay, great. Everything reconciles. Now the books are closed and I can run a P&L, right? And that P&L is going to stay the same. It's not going to change because I know I've closed the books. I've reconciled them. Sometimes you can even lock them down so that you don't touch them again, right? Because they're done for the month of March. And now you can make decisions. So we would typically have about a 3-day close period where we're, doing all that work, and then we're able to, consolidate the books and run our P&L. And we did that every single month, even though we didn't have to file taxes. Why? Well, heck, there's so much data involved in those numbers. So right after we get those P&Ls, we'd sit down and have strategy meetings. How can we do better? Where did all of our key metrics fall this year, right? And you can do that once you have that final data. It's so, so important. So that is, that's what I wanted to tell you today. Those are the steps that I want you to take. And also, if you want to take it even further, right, and you want to really get into how do I, make use of this data in making those financial decisions in my business. Again, if you were on my masterclass, we talked about how important it is to be the CFO of your own business, to to be using that data regularly to make decisions that are going to help you grow and scale your business, right? If that sounds good to you, if you're interested in that, we've got one more day, y'all, one more day for Financial Fitness Formula. These are all of our new members for 2022. We have one class in 2022, and this is it. This is it. This is the only time you're going to be able to get into my signature program this year. We close Thursday, which is tomorrow for those of you watching me live. Tomorrow evening, we don't even go all the way to midnight, so don't wait until midnight. Tomorrow evening, 9 p.m. Central Time, we will be closing the doors because we are starting next week. We are starting the program next week. It's 10 weeks where we're going to be live together, and it's going to be amazing. And I'm so excited to get to know. I've already started getting to know some of these amazing people and their businesses. It works for product and service-based businesses. We have lots of information about Financial Fitness Formula and what it can do for you, how it can help you maximize your profitability, pay yourself more, put a plan in place for managing your finances well, okay? Forecast your future to give you that roadmap to get to where you want to go, right? Really take control of the finance side of your business. So if you're ready, if you want next year to be totally different than it was this year, okay? If you want tax time to be a breeze, thank you. Yes, it's an investment in your business and yourself, and it's a tax write-off, just FYI. Just FYI. Typically, these are tax deductions because it's education for your business. I believe that this is an investment in long-term health of your business. Again, only time to get in 2022, jamietrull.com/FFF. Join us. We can't wait to have you. I would love to get more of your names up on my wall back here, my star wall. You guys are amazing. Let us know if you have questions. Also, if you go to jamietrull.com/FFF, there's a little question thing in the bottom. If you have questions, then I would love for you to submit a question. I will answer you back personally via video response to any questions that you have. If you're curious if this is right for you, then that is a great place to go and ask any questions, because I want to make sure that you're making the best decision for you and that you're making an informed decision. And I'm totally honest with people about whether this is a good program for their type of business. So excited, so excited. Thank you all for being here. We will be back next time, and go check out the program. Bye for now.